Hey everybody, this is Theoretical Bullshit once again. I just woke up and I have a hangover. And that's not cool, man. This is a video response to Anlao, who just posted up a video for me. I'm in the process of doing, other videos and things that I've been sort of working on, but I just really wanted to stop and respond to you and tell you how much I appreciate your thought process and your openness and your compliments. You've catered very much to my ego, which thanks. You started with talking about the sort of the Bible and the way that God is sort of represented in the Bible, how creation and all the points thereafter seem to be almost a scientific process for God, almost a trial and error. And I agree with that. I think that given the assumption that religion and theology is a sort of man-made coping mechanism for not understanding the universe, by primitive human beings and has sort of developed over time, I think it makes sense that we have a very anthropomorphic, is that the word? A very human seeming God. I don't think you'll find gods or versions of gods that are not relatable. I don't think you can search the world and you won't find a religion that has a God that is not in some way relatable to human beings, because that's the whole point. If you are going to invent a God, deliberately or not deliberately, consciously or not consciously, the kind of God that would be invented is not a God that is outside of our grasp. It would be a God that is understandable to us, and the Christian God is very, very, you hear all the time that God works in mysterious ways and God is outside of our comprehension. I've done the comprehension video, and God is outside of our understanding, and it's true. You sort of get those responses once you get down the line. You start assessing problems with God or self-contradictory attributes. That's when you start getting into, well, God's mysterious. You can't understand God. You can't know God. But up until those points, God's a he. God seems to have thoughts and moral consciousness and seems to solve problems in a very human way, in the same way that human beings solve problems. And God is attributed this characteristic of omniscience. And I hear it all the time. I hear that God is omniscient. I hear that God knows everything that was, is, and will be. And but that doesn't seem to represent very accurately the God portrayed in the Bible. I think omniscience sort of came later to solve a lot of theological problems. But you've got a God that, as you said, creates the world and then has to start over, or creates Adam and has to pick one of Adam's ribs to create Eve, or has to ask questions like, who gave you this forbidden fruit and who told you that you could eat from the tree? I think these are human necessities, and these are things that we need God to have in order for us to understand Him and thus to worship Him. Again, I'm saying Him because that's a relatable quality too. So I think there's truth to that. I think gods everywhere need to be very human-like until the problems come up, and then they can be, beyond our comprehension. But the last thing that you talked about was atheism, and how atheism really seems to have this like mandate of hatred and attacking believers, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of like positive associations. I'm with you. I see the Rational Response Squad, and it kills me. They're brutal. You know what I mean? And to me, they don't seem so much interested in the conversation as being interested in shocking people. And I think there are a lot of atheists out here on YouTube that really are more interested in shocking people. And I think that comes from a decent place. I think that comes from having experienced the mistrust just from somebody knowing that you don't believe in God. There's, especially if you grew up in a religious community, oh my God, no pun intended, you suffer. You suffer for not believing in God. And so I think this sort of shock value, demeaning condescension comes from a defensive sort of retaliation kind of thing. I kind of stopped using the word atheist for myself. I could take or leave that, and I don't need to be referred to as an atheist. I want to be referred to as rational, you know. Atheism has now pulled in sort of all these associations with it, and there is sort of a dogma to atheism. I think saying that you're atheist has sort of become synonymous with saying that you're not interested in enlightenment, or you're not interested in spirituality, or you're not interested in mystery of the universe. And I think that's a defensive thing too. I think if religion weren't around, if there weren't arguments for the existence of God, an atheist could say, "Oh my God, I had such an amazing experience," without fearing that somebody who believes in God or somebody religious is going to jump in and go, "See, that's proof of God." So we're not safe to really talk about things like love, things like mystery, those things that are not so much tangible, not so much explainable, because that's where God comes in. You know what I mean? We don't get to have that mystery, because that mystery tends to be considered a point against us, a point against atheism being a valid worldview. Somebody else jumps in and says, "Aha! Well, you have mystery. I don't have mystery. I can explain all of that. I can explain love, and I can explain, God explains all those things. So if you experience love, that's God. If you experience mystery or some kind of enlightenment or some kind of deep spiritual realization, well, that's obviously God." And so we kind of have to be on the defensive. And I think through trial and error, a lot of atheists learn not to go there. And so the concept of God comes up, or the concept of love comes up when we go, chemical processes, because we don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear about how it's, that's evidence of God, because it's not. Love can be explained in a humanistic worldview. Mystery can be explained. Enlightenment experiences, spirituality. You can be spiritual without having to accept a proposition on the basis of no evidence. So, but I do understand where that comes from, and I do see what you see, that in the atheistic community there tends to be a sort of harshness and irreverence for compassion. So I understand. I think, though, just like any other revolution, atheists are the least trusted minority in the country. You know what I mean? At least in this country. 40%. You've heard this. I've said this before, but only 40% of Americans would vote for an otherwise overqualified presidential candidate, knowing that that candidate was an atheist, and that's way lower than Mormons, blacks, gays, Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientologists. We are really, truly the least trusted minority. And so there tends to be two camps. There's the camp that tends to reason, that tends to want to have conversations with people like me, but you're not going to create a movement this way. I can't go around and have conversations with everyone in the world. Or you can make a scene and shock people and be rude and mean and get attention. And then hopefully that will bring people to at least investigating the subject. And I think that seems to be the methodology for people like the Rational Response Squad, and I think even Richard Dawkins, to a degree, calling his book The God Delusion. I think there's strategy in that sort of mean, dismissive retaliation. But in any way, I hear what you're saying. I've gone on way too long, and I should need to probably cut this up a bit. But again, thank you, Anlao. I really appreciated your response, and hopefully I'll hear from you again soon. Take care.